Welcome to the greatest podcast in sports betting entertainment. My name is Tanner Kern, certified J, bona fide stud, and you can't teach that. In this right here, this is G Money Grant Mitchell. The people on the internet say he does the intro wrong, and you can't teach that. Bada boom. Man, the people in the room. G Money Grant Mitchell. What do you say to that?
Well, I say it's funny that you brought it up because I was actually going to address that. The only thing I've watched back the footage. Okay. I obviously know you're saying certified G bona fide stud. We've been doing the podcast for years now. I know what you're saying. I've watched the footage. I've analyzed it. I've looked at the all 22 of our podcast clips. And what the conclusion that I've arrived at is that maybe because there's some transmission delays in our video, what I'm saying isn't coming out at the same time you're saying it. I'm a little behind. So that's maybe the only reason I can think of. But I know the certified G bona fide stud. I hear it several times every week. I know it's coming.
It's been addressed. So now, what is the exact Twitter handle, Grant?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of numbers in it. It's like something 160754342.
We got to look it up. The official. We got to give him a shout.
Are we going to put it out there? We're going to put it on Front Street?
I mean, I think we kind of got to here. This is a big moment. If I can find it, I think it's like Litecoin, right? Litecoin.
That rings a bell now that you say that. I think it is something like that.
It's Litecoin. He'll be happy to hear that we're talking about him on the pod. But he is Grant's biggest intro hater. Anyways,
he's been saying it for like a year now that I don't know the intro.
I think over a year. I think it could be back to like the Parlay Power Hour days, honestly.
That's a throwback that people out there probably have no idea what it means.
That was so much fun. Me and Grant used to do a show, Parlay Power Hour. We'd come on and we had another one of our buddies on named Will Reed, and we were just giving betting picks in the morning for like 10 minutes. That was fun.
It was fun. That was also very early in our days in the sports betting industry.
That was early in like the YouTube and TikTok days too. Like not everybody who bet on sports had like a betting Twitter or a betting TikTok or a betting Instagram. I feel like everyone does now. Like I'll see a lot of people who have 10, 20 followers on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, just posting their tickets. Like I feel like everybody does that now.
Yeah, it's become there was a stigma surrounding gambling and it's just not there anymore. And it's like it's the cool thing to do. It's the it thing. So yeah, everybody's jumping in on it.
Yeah, gambling is cool now. That's right. Because there was a period there, like right around, I'd say 2020, gambling was still very taboo. Like it was New Jersey was 2018, like a few states flipped, obviously, but now it's like if your state doesn't have legal gambling, it's weird. Like I don't think I've been to a state that doesn't have sports betting since Florida flipped in a long time.
Yeah, I'm in a Discord as well, and I was talking with somebody the other day, and I think they said they live in Austin. Forget the city, but they said they live in Texas, and they wanted to place some bets, so they just drove across the state border. And I got a friend who lives in South Carolina in Myrtle Beach. He's got a friend not in Myrtle, but also in South Carolina. He does the same thing. He's about 45 minutes from the North Carolina border. He drives up there, goes to a gas station, places his bets, and then he drives back home. People want to do it. So yeah, we're at 38 of 50 states with legalization now, and more are coming.
Yeah, and if you don't have legal betting, I feel bad for you right now because we got some good football games coming up this weekend. We got some good football games coming up in the future with the college football playoff. But before we talk about that, Graham, before we talk about last night's Jameis Winston masterclass, tell the people why they need to not only subscribe to Ride the Line, but they also need to check out WSN.com.
Well, before I do that, I got to say that was one of your best transitions of all time. So one of your best segues. So props on that.
Appreciate that.
The reasons you want to subscribe to this channel, first of all, it takes 2 seconds. It's right there. It's one click away. Tanner and I are here multiple times every week. We're talking news headlines, giving betting picks, analysis, telling stories. So hit that subscribe button. And then if you're actually really wanting to dive into the gambling, whether you're looking for game previews, analysis of player props, you want promo codes to unlock some bonuses at your sportsbook, go to WSN.com. We got all that stuff right there. Myself, Tanner, and a whole bunch of experts in the industry. WSN.com, that's the place to be.
That is the place to be, Grant. And last night for the Cleveland Browns, Ohio was the place to be. I don't know, maybe the intro is not as good there, but looking at Jameis Winston last night, I feel like this man is going to throw an interception every time he touches the football. He looks like a goofball playing quarterback. That's why we love him. he played really well last night. He made some big plays. The entire, talk about Jerry Jeudy. He was fantastic. David Njoku, fantastic. His entire Browns team was really good last night. They wanted to win. I felt they controlled the game pretty much the entire night. But when you look at this game, Grant, should the Pittsburgh Steelers be concerned at the result?
Okay. I think the answer is both. They should not be concerned because this is what happened or what happens. Mike Tomlin, he loses some. He's great. He wins a whole bunch of games he shouldn't with a very strange style where they're going to win with a blocked field goal or they're going to intercept a 2-point conversion and return it. Like they always win in these unorthodox ways, but then they lose some random games that you're not expecting. As a Washington fan, I remember back in like 2019, 2020, when they were 10-0, 11-0, what they were, or whatever they were, and then they lost to the Commanders. I think we were the Washington football team at that point, and there was nothing going for us. It's just weird losses that you can't explain. Now, they should be worried from that perspective that it continues to happen, but also they shouldn't be worried in that they're 8-3 and they've already beaten some really good teams. Right before this, they were able to take down Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, and Lamar was playing the best football of his career and the best football of anyone in the league. So it does suck for them, but it happens. It's a road divisional matchup in a division that hates itself, hates each other, and it was in the snow. It's a little bit forgivable, I think.
I think it is forgivable. The Browns are much better than what they've put on tape this year. They're much better than what their record shows. Jameis makes them a totally different team. And this was a really good matchup for Cleveland in the sense of like the Saints are much more explosive than the Steelers, at least when you look at what they can do. I'm not saying they've won as many games, but they can put the Browns away because they can go shot for shot and start scoring some points. I think the Steelers being the quote unquote Steelers was a handicap to them last night, because they could have just thrown the ball all over the field. I don't care about the snow. They were lighting that secondary up for Cleveland. Myles Garrett got his pressure, but for the most part, Russ threw for 270 last night. And the amount of times that they chose to run the ball early in downs instead of just going on the attack and trying to step on Cleveland's throat, I think that ultimately cost them the game last night.
Yeah, Pittsburgh does this. They refuse to get away from the run. And look, Najee Harris has had a little bit of a resurgent year because he looked washed at 25 years old. He's been better as of late, but still, this isn't a great running team. And yes, the elements played a part last night, but to your point, I mean, they ran 34 times. They got 120 yards out of it, so they were a little productive, I guess, but that's less than 4 yards per carry. That's not what you're looking for, especially when you're running 34 times. Jaylen Warren, 11 for 45, Najee, 16 for 41. Like, it's one thing to control the clock, set up the play action. And like you said, Russ was great, 270 yards. But this is not an offense that can withstand a team scoring against them. If they give up more than 20 points, it's usually unlikely they're going to find a way to win that game.
But last night they had every opportunity to win the game, win a shootout. Like Russ, even that late touchdown after the Jameis fumble that he hit over the top there in the heavy snow, heavy wind. These dudes are streaking wide open down the field. George Pickens was wide open in the end zone a couple plays before that. Like these dudes are running straight down the field last night the entire night. So I don't know why they didn't choose to throw the ball a little more and why they kept running, because the run was not working at all. Like Cleveland's front seven was fantastic. Their secondary was not good, but their front seven was awesome last night. So I think that ultimately cost them the game. And you got to give credit to Cleveland, but for the most part, Pittsburgh was in a non-snow game. Pittsburgh probably blows them off the field.
And while I think it is harder, while it's definitely no doubt harder for the quarterback to throw the football, the act of catching the snap, dropping back and throwing an accurate pass, that's harder in the snow. I think it's easier for receivers to separate because being on defense and especially being a defensive back, it's reactionary. You're not the aggressor. You have to see what the receiver's doing and then respond to it. So if the receiver knows they're making this cut and it's this route, they're taking this angle, blah, 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 this is the timing. That's what the defensive back has to react to. And now they're doing it in a surface that, you plant your foot, you might slid out. It's harder for you to track. So, it is harder for Russ, but he had it cooking. And to your point, I guess, if Russ is saying, hey, I can make these throws, the receivers are continually getting open, then just feed it to him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, last night it was more of a schematic issue than like a snow issue early in the game too, because there were like 3rd and 15s, 3rd and 11s, where the Steelers are just hitting these big shots down the field, and I'm like, what is going on? It almost seemed like Cleveland's defense was just selling out for the run so much. That was what they were emphasizing, and credit to them, it worked. But you also got to give credit to Jameis Winston last night, who was fantastic. Grant, is Jameis Winston a starting quarterback in the NFL?
Absolutely. I said it before the year started. I said if the Browns were serious, then they would have started Jameis Winston over Deshaun Watson. And he continues to prove it. His numbers, not amazing last night, 219 yards, no touchdowns and an interception, but he did drive them down the field. They scored 14 points in the fourth quarter after they'd been shut out for most of the game. Not shut out, but shut down. And you look at his numbers since he stepped in. He had 334 yards, 3 touchdowns in his first start against the Ravens. Next week against the Chargers, not good, but 235 yards. At least he was moving the ball. That's something Deshaun never did. And then against the Saints, 395 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. So he's definitely 1,000% playing the position better than Deshaun Watson did. And Deshaun, as bad as he was, maybe there's 1 or 2 guys out there. Like, is Deshaun better than Gardner Minshew? Maybe is he better than Bryce Young? Maybe there's a place for Jameis. I'm not saying he's the long-term future, but if you're the New York Jets and you're done with Aaron Rodgers after this year and you need a stopgap before you draft somebody in 2026, sign Jameis Winston. There are plenty of teams. The Las Vegas Raiders should want to sign Jameis Winston. The Panthers, if they're done with Bryce Young, they should be thinking about it. There's a lot of teams where he could go to.
Someone needs to sign him, though, with the intention, like sign Jameis and draft a quarterback. Like, let the quarterback learn from Jameis. Because it seems like teams don't want to do that. Like, teams bring these veterans to be the backup, and it's like, just let the man learn. Let the kids learn from the veterans. And Jameis would be, I think, a good leadership quarterback, good transition quarterback to do that. So he's a perfect signing to be at least the starting quarterback for a year somewhere, maybe more. Because again, I do, every time he touches the football, I think he's going to throw an interception. I don't know why. He just gives off that vibe to me, but he's a hell of a quarterback.
Well, you're justified in that because he had the year where he had 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. One of the weirdest, most remarkable seasons in the history of the NFL. But I guess kind of to your point here, Jameis, everything we've seen from him, he seems like such a lovable guy. He has this bubbly, warm personality. If you're going to draft a rookie to come in there and say, hey, if it's Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson, think about how different their career pans out if they get to sit a full year behind Jameis. We know how encouraging and how jovial of a guy he is. Probably gets them some confidence. I don't know what he's going to be like to learn off of as far as his study habits and his actual performance. But Jameis was the number 1 pick in the draft. He has made the Pro Bowl. He has had some good years in the NFL. So, yes, I think Jameis can definitely be a guy that you sign for a year, draft a rookie, have them learn from him, and then slowly transition to him. And we also know Jameis not going to make a scene if he's moved to the backup. He's been there for a few years now. He had no issues with it. And even when Deshaun got hurt and it was his job to step in and start, he was upset that he was more upset at Deshaun's injury and that he would rather have stayed on the bench and Deshaun been healthy than him go play.
He's the ultimate team guy, like the definition of a team player. And I think, say what we want. We all think differently about this moment. But when Deshaun Watson got booed coming off the field and like he cut this like epic promo on how the fans should have never booed him and all that. And whether you think they should have booed him or not, like he's the ultimate team guy. Like he will defend anyone. He will, whether he should or not, he will literally have everyone's back on that team. And we've seen that. We've seen that pretty much everywhere he's been at as the backup quarterback in the Saints. Like he's that guy. The Buccaneers when he was the starting quarterback. He's a fun quarterback to watch. I think he seems like a great teammate. So hopefully he has a job in the NFL.
Did you see when he was trying to get Pittsburgh to jump off sides?
No, I didn't see that. Oh, I didn't have my volume on for like the last quarter. So what was that?
So it was sometime in the second half, I think. Actually, it might have. I don't know. It was before the snow really started coming down. So second, third quarter, somewhere in there. Anyway, it was 4th down. They line up. I think it was 4th and 5, 4th and 6. Everybody knew they weren't going to snap it. And Jameis is, staying there doing the hard count. And Patrick Queen kind of turns his back to him and just waves at him like this, like, whatever. We know you're not snapping it. And there's like 2 seconds left on the play clock. And Jameis goes, someone jump off sides. Damn it.
That's he must be fun to play against too. Honestly, like it was a fun game to watch. Like just from a fan perspective, and again, like my bets hit, so that always makes a difference too when you're watching. Like the Bills Chiefs game was great too, but I had the Chiefs in a teaser, and then Josh Allen destroyed that at the end of the game, so that wasn't as fun. But like just from a football watching fan perspective, that was a fun game.
It was very fun. One thing I want to take issue with, because you know me, I love to call out coaching mistakes. I've said this before. I said it, I think last week. Would have been after the Steelers or the Commanders played the Eagles. So that would have been last Friday, maybe. I don't know, whenever it was. I think every NFL team should have a situational coach. It's their job purely to advise them what to do in situations. You know what I would not advise my team to do if I'm the Steelers, we're in the fourth quarter and it's 3rd and 4, we bring in Justin Fields for a play and they throw it 40 yards down the field into the snow. This is a prime example, and I'm not saying Arthur Smith is the greatest offensive coordinator in the world, but coaches do this all the time. They think they've got some cool wrinkle, and it's going to catch the defense so off guard, they're not going to know what to do. I don't care what the situation is. Having the backup come in cold off the bench to throw it 40 yards down the field on 3rd and 4 into snow is a horrible idea. You cannot convince me that was the smart thing to do.
Well, if you're going to have him throw it, there needs to be a run attached to it, and that's probably with the sprint out. Like again, that could have been an RPO where if the leverage is here, you're throwing it. If not, you're going to run read option on like the backside. But like if you're going to have him come in and throw, I think it needs to be a play where in the moment he's deciding if he wants to run or throw the football. Because that's where he's most dangerous. Now, running a vertical down the field was not smart with him. I was shocked when they did that. And it helped. It stopped the clock, and then you have the bad punt, and now they're already crossed the 50. And again, the Steelers defense had every opportunity to take the Browns off the field there. They couldn't do it. Like Cleveland converted and just kept hitting throws. But that cost the game, really, that play. If they convert there, game's almost over.
Yeah, like you said, I got no problems with throwing the football. You know, we need 4. Let's throw it for 6, not 40. Not throw a one-on-one jump ball. And it has something to do with the surface, obviously, but I don't know if you noticed, even the Hail Mary at the end, guys could like barely jump out there on the field. So you're throwing it up for a one-on-one. It was just the wrong thing to do. The ball looked terrible coming out of Fields' hands, and I don't blame him. He hasn't thrown all night, and he's throwing into wind and snow. As soon as he threw that ball, I knew there was no way that was being completed.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Grant, we ready to talk about college football?
I mean, we've got a huge weekend ahead of us, so yeah, let's do it.
We got the big one, Indiana versus Ohio State. We're going to find out what Indiana's made of in this football game, but nobody really knows. Like people think Indiana's trash. They could be, they might not be. We don't know because they haven't played anybody, but I'll say this. And we were talking about Josh Pate, how much we love Josh Pate before the show. I think this was a quote from him, but it's like, you don't want to find out what Indiana's got. Like they're playing well. They're running through a brick wall for their coach, which is half the battle. If your team's ready to run through a brick wall for your head coach, you're in good shape. So I think they will come in and play hard. This also could be a sense of a trap line like Tennessee, Georgia last week, where, people were taking the 9 points with Tennessee and Georgia basically turned it on late in the game and found a way to cover. And they did, don't get me wrong, dominated the game. But this could be one where it's like a late cover for Ohio State or Indiana's in the game. So how do you think that's going to go, Grant?
Well, I agree with everything you said. In my opinion, this is the most difficult game of the entire college football year to handicap, because if you look at just the raw numbers, Indiana has the 3rd most efficient offense in the entire country, and they allow the 4th fewest yards per play of 134 schools. They allow 2.7 yards per carry. That's number 2 only behind Ole Miss. They have been dominant in nearly every way. Nebraska, we saw give Ohio State a real battle. I think it was 21-17, that score, if I'm not mistaken. And Indiana beat them, I want to say 56-7. Common opponents are not a great metric to begin with, but because we have so little to go off with Indiana, it's one of the few things we do have. And again, Indiana's been so impressive. Now, if you look at strength of schedule, Ohio State is 9th, Indiana is 62nd. They have not even played, much less beaten, a ranked opponent up to this point in time. Now they're getting the number 2 team in the country. So 1000%, we really don't know what Indiana is. We will know at the end of this weekend. If they lose, that's not the end of the world. If they lose by 4, 6, 7 points, we can say, okay, you know what? They hung tough with them. They went toe to toe. That's a physical team. That's a great team in Ohio State. Indiana never played someone like that before. Now that they have, they'll be better for it, and we'll see what happens. That could happen, but if they lose by 3, 4 touchdowns, then we basically just have to write off everything that we've seen from them.
They won't get in if they lose by 3 or 4 touchdowns. I don't think. I think you bump an SEC, and like the last SEC team out right now would be Tennessee. I think you'd put Tennessee in over them because
Tennessee's in right now, are they not?
No,
they're number 11 in the rankings,
but they're not in because you have to let the participation trophy team in. You have to
Are
put.
You talking about Boise?
Yeah, you got to put a Boise in.
Come on.
No.
Boise has 1 loss, and it was to Oregon by 3 points, and that was early.
That was early in the season when Oregon was trash too.
It was early in the season for Boise State too.
How you do the rankings? How you do the rankings? Yes, Boise State deserves to get in. You need to put the mid-major team in to make it fun and exciting. But if you put Tennessee up against Boise State, I am taking Tennessee to win the football game.
This is a bigger version of the debate that we had last year with Florida State and however many years before. I remember one of our first Back to Parlay Power Hour.
The committee made the right decision with Florida State too last year.
Yes, but that's because of extenuating circumstances. That was because of the quarterback injury.
If the quarterback doesn't get injured, though, they're making the playoffs.
That's what I'm saying. Boise State doesn't have an injury.
I know, Grant, but Boise State would get probably shit on by at least 3/4 of these teams.
Well, right now they're the 12th in the rankings. So they're behind, if we're talking about the SEC, they're behind Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Tennessee. So if they lose to any of those teams, it should not be a surprise. They're behind them in the rankings.
Yes.
The first SEC team they're ahead of, like the SEC team that's closest to them, but behind them, is Texas A&M. And I think that's somewhat of an even matchup. I think Boise State, Texas A&M is a very close game.
Texas A&M is terrible. This is my problem with how they do the rankings. You can't put Tennessee at 11 and not put them in. You know what I'm saying?
I need to pull the bracket up right now
because Tennessee is technically the first team out because they bump up. Like Boise State bumps up to take their spot, and then BYU has to get in even though they're 14th because they're a conference winner, or it's going to be Colorado. But going back to Ohio State and Indiana too, I think we can take this from the perspective, before we close the door on this game, you were talking about strength of schedule. Who has Ohio State really played either, though? Yes, they lost on the road to Oregon. They played a tough Oregon team. They beat Penn State on the road. That's a very quality win. Penn State can never win the big game. James Franklin has never won the big game. And then outside of that, you've played Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, Ohio, Iowa, Nebraska, Purdue, Northwestern. So Ohio State's good, but I think Ohio State's getting elevated in this game because they're Ohio State. Indiana's coming out of nowhere. So Indiana hasn't played anybody, but Ohio State hasn't played a brutal schedule. You lost on the road to Oregon, and you beat a Penn State team that never has won the big game and that you've owned over the years.
Yeah, brand bias is absolutely a real thing. And I saw Joel Klatt do a cool analysis of this year's Indiana team with last year's Michigan team. And they have this at this point in the season, they have the same record because obviously undefeated. Their strength of schedule was basically the same, and Indiana was ahead in offensive and defensive production. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. This Indiana team is literally doing what Michigan did last year, and they went on to win the national championship, but it's the brand of Michigan. And part of that is justified. Like we're talking about, these SEC teams. If I were to say, hey, Boise State has 1 loss, it was to the number 1 team in the country. A team like LSU has 3 losses. Boise State is better than them. At its face, I would be right. But then you're like, well, here's the thing. LSU plays this really tough schedule. They've got these players. This is the history of the program, blah, blah, blah. So you can start to make the argument for it. Brand bias exists for a reason, but I'm with you. Ohio State really hasn't proven a whole lot. The win against Penn State was great, yes, but that was a very close game, and Penn State honestly kind of tried to go out of their way to lose that game. So not only am I excited to see what Indiana has to offer, I'm excited to see what Ohio State's going to do too.
I don't know why Boise State would get a bye, though. I know it's the 4 highest ranked conference champions, but
Well, basically, they're saying that Boise State right now, and this could change, but right now they think Boise State's a better team than either BYU
BYU
or
or
Colorado.
Colorado, which that it probably will change. These brackets change every week, but I don't think. I think the way the college football playoff is done, and I think this is a disservice to the teams playing the toughest schedules. I think your top 4 teams need to be the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12. Like, I don't think Boise State should come in and automatically get a bye.
See, here I agree with you. It should be that way in general, but I'm not. The Big 12 is the odd man out here. I almost think the ACC. I don't think Miami is that good. I don't think
I don't
Clemson is
either.
that good.
I don't either. But traditionally, in a traditional year, for the most part, especially as NIL continues to develop, I just don't think Boise State should get a first round bye, especially when you did lose to Oregon. That's a quality loss. But other than that, like, your quality wins UNLV.
I mean, at the time, it was a good win. I'll give them that.
But it's not like, hell, Alabama going on the road beating Oklahoma is a better win than half of Boise State's wins.
I think Boise State's biggest selling point is it's like what I was saying. If Indiana loses to Ohio State by 3, that's what Boise did to Oregon. That's like one of their biggest selling points right now. You know, we're a field goal away from potentially beating the best team in the country.
Yeah, and so did Wisconsin last week, right? So Oregon's been good. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Oregon's better than Georgia. If you said Oregon or the field right now, I'm taking the field 100%. If you said Oregon, the only team I would take Oregon against, like, if Notre Dame faces Oregon, I'm taking Oregon. If Alabama faces Oregon, I'm taking Alabama.
I mean, well, Bama is a whole different thing because I think Kalen DeBoer is a big game coach. And I'm not saying Dan Lanning isn't, but we haven't seen him in that environment yet necessarily. Oregon's speed is phenomenal. That's the thing I'll give them. They have so much speed. They've got more speed than anybody. They played physical against Ohio State, but that was one game. If we get into a bracket, and they're going to get a bye, obviously, but let's say Oregon had to start in, 5 through 12, and they had to win, what would that be, 4 straight games, then it might be difficult. Like, if 2 of those are against SEC teams, you throw in a Penn State or an Ohio State, whoever, I would be interested to see how their level of physicality holds up during that stretch.
Yeah. So, Grant, let's take a look at the current playoff bracket, because I do think for the most part, the ranking is correct. Like, I would give the committee that, in the sense of, right now, when you're looking at it, like the 14 teams up, I wouldn't put Texas A&M in over anyone. I would put Colorado in as a division winner. Clemson would not get in. South Carolina, Army, Tulane, Arizona State. Like, the back half of this group is really bad. So I do think the top teams are in. Tennessee, you can make the argument they should be in, but I don't know if they'll get in. Well, let's look at the bracket, though, right now, and say, if this is what we get, let's predict our national champion. And it's probably not going to be this way. So let's start. Alabama, Notre Dame. Who would you take in that game?
Bama.
Easy. I'm on Bama too. BYU, Ohio State. We're not going to talk about that.
Slaughter.
Yeah, slaughter. Now, if it's Colorado, Ohio State, slaughter?
No, not a slaughter. Okay. The final score could be a slaughter, but Shedeur Sanders just has the ability to throw Colorado into every game they play. So even if they lose by 14 to 20 points, I think it could be a deal where it's like a 6-point game, 10 minutes left, and Ohio State opens it up.
Yeah. Georgia versus Penn State. If Carson Beck plays like he played last week, Georgia beats Penn State by 2 scores.
The biggest thing for me there is, I agree 1000%, but I think this was not just Carson Beck's best game. I think it was the offensive line and the receivers' best game. Beck had been terrible, but I also feel like he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders because Georgia's receivers were leading the nation in drops and his offensive line was bad. So if those groups are going to step up, I think Beck can play at this level. He did it last year. I don't see why he can't do it again.
This is the game that's probably going to change here. Ole Miss, Indiana. I'm going to say Ole Miss moves on no matter who they play here. If it's not Indiana, I could see it being Ole Miss, Tennessee. That's going to be a fun first round game. I would take Ole Miss to win that one.
I would probably take Ole Miss as well. Both of those run defenses are outstanding. And the reason I would take Ole Miss is because Tennessee's really leaned into the run. And Nico started the year amazingly, but he's really started to wear down in conference play. So I would take Ole Miss there too.
Ole Miss has to beat Florida this weekend in the Swamp, which it wouldn't surprise me if they beat them by 3 scores. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a close game in the fourth quarter. But that's going to be that's a tougher game than like Alabama playing on the road against Oklahoma this weekend.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, Oklahoma might not score 10 points.
No, definitely not. All right, so we got Alabama, Oregon right now. I'm taking Alabama in that game.
I would be I think I'm a bigger Kalen DeBoer fan than pretty much anybody that I've come across. I would still have to go Oregon just because Oregon, the Wisconsin game aside, and honestly, let me defend Oregon for a second here. They're the only team in all of college football that played 8 straight conference games without a deviation to a non-con, like Georgia playing UMass this weekend. I don't understand how that's even possible, or having a bye. So it was 2 straight months of conference football. That was their first shaky game. So I want to defend them there. I've got huge respect for Kalen DeBoer, but Dan Lanning getting 2 weeks, and Oregon has gotten so much better as the year's gone on. I would give it to Oregon in a very, very close game.
Grant, that's called good scheduling. When you schedule UMass, and everyone's complaining about these SEC teams playing like bad schools late in the season. They need to, because they beat themselves up so much early in the year playing the games.
They do, but I don't want to see Tennessee and Texas, El Paso. I don't want to see Georgia and UMass. I don't want to see whoever in Mercer or South Carolina State. You know what it is for me? And I have this problem. It's the same problem I have with the NBA in the in-season tournament. I hate that we have 3 or 4 weeks of here's an in-season tournament game on Tuesday and Friday. All the other games are regular. Like, allow me to buy into the theater of the tournament, play the tournament out, and then it ends. With the SEC, rearrange, have buys at different times. I'm sorry. Just live with the bye coming when it comes. Don't go, if you're Georgia, don't play Texas and then Florida, and then you've got Ole Miss and Tennessee, and now we're playing UMass, and then we're going to play for maybe the conference championship. It feels so out of place.
I'm kind of worried about the UMass football team this weekend. A little concerned for them.
I can't remember. Did we talk about this? Did I tell you that they fired their coach?
No.
Yeah, UMass. UMass fired their coach. So the replacement, his first game is against Georgia, which should be fun.
Yeah. So wait, if Texas is going to beat Texas A&M in the final week of the season, so is the SEC championship Texas Georgia? No, because Alabama beat Georgia.
No, if Bama wins out, Bama makes the conference championship.
Yeah, okay, so Bama wins, and they're going to win out. So, okay, so Bama, realistically, looking at this bracket, Bama might be the 2 seed. I think Bama probably has Bama has an easier road, honestly. I think if they play Notre Dame in the first, obviously you want the bye and you want home field, and I think Bama probably beats Texas in the conference championship game.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. But Bam, no matter what, they're going in. Okay. So we got that. You take Ole Miss. All right. So Oregon, you're taking Oregon. I'm taking Alabama, Boise State, Ohio State, or Colorado, or BYU. I'm taking Ohio State. Let's just say Ohio State gets to the semis. Right.
I'm taking Boise State over BYU. I'm taking Ohio State and Colorado over Boise State. Yeah. I almost think, in a very weird way, I think Boise would be better off playing in the first round just because they're hot, but they're also an underdog. So keep the momentum rolling. Don't give them time off.
I agree with that. Georgia versus Miami. I will take Georgia in a landslide win over Miami. And then Ole Miss versus Texas. I'm taking Ole Miss.
I would put that at a pick 'em. I'm sure Texas will be favored. I don't really know if that would be justified. I would take Texas, but I don't fault you for taking Ole Miss at all.
I don't think Quinn Ewers is that good. Jackson Dart's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, so I would take them there.
I agree with you there, but Texas's defense is pretty remarkable.
They're very good. Yep. So we go now. We semifinal. I have Alabama, Ohio State. You have Oregon, Ohio State. I would take Oregon over Ohio State. I probably take Alabama. If Alabama gets to the semis, I think they're going to the national championship game.
Underrated sort of story this week is that Ohio State lost their center. Blanking on his name, but he transferred from Alabama. It was the guy that everybody hated because he was committing the penalties. Anyway, tore his Achilles in practice this week, so prayers, hope he gets better. But that's a big injury, and Oregon did their thing last time they played Ohio State. I would take Oregon.
Then we get Georgia versus Ole Miss or Georgia versus Texas. If Georgia plays Ole Miss, I think they beat them. If Georgia plays Texas, I think it's a different story potentially, but I still like Georgia getting to the national championship game.
Yes, I agree with you. I like Georgia.
I think Georgia has the easiest path. In this bracket's going to change, but I think Georgia has the easiest path right now when you look at they're going to beat Penn State most likely. They're going to beat Miami most likely. And then you're in the semifinal against a common opponent.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think if I want to go this far. I think Boise State might have a better chance at beating Georgia than Miami, just because Boise State might have the best player on the field in that game. Even though it is Georgia, they would have the best player. I know Cam Ward's going to be in the Heisman running, going to be an early draft pick. I don't think he's the best player in a game against Georgia.
Miami's not that good. You haven't played anybody, first of all. Florida, a bad Florida team early. Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, Virginia Tech. You almost lost to Virginia Tech.
They should have lost to Virginia Tech. They should have lost to Cal.
And you were in a dogfight with Louisville. You could have lost that game. Florida State, you've obviously beat Duke. You blow out, and then Georgia Tech's a good football team that beat you. Like, you also should have lost to Virginia Tech. That was the game on the Hail Mary at the end when they caught it, right?
Yep. And then there was a referee, a phantom penalty against Cal. They should have lost that game too.
Yep. So I don't think they're that good. And then, okay, so we got our semifinal. So you got Georgia going to the national championship on this side?
If Georgia's going to lose, I think it has to be early. Once Kirby Smart and that team gets in the postseason and they start rolling, I think it's harder and harder to slow them down.
And if we get Georgia versus Alabama in the national championship game,
I have Ohio State right now.
But if, say, we get Georgia versus Alabama, then we'll do I'm taking Georgia against Ohio State or Alabama in the national championship no matter what. But if you get Georgia versus Alabama, who would you take?
See, that one's so difficult because we saw them play.
Revenge game. That's Georgia.
Bama, well, this is the thing. I don't know if you can call it a revenge game fully because Georgia dominated the second. Bama annihilated them in the first quarter. I think it was 28-0 at the end of the first, right?
Yeah.
And then Georgia won the rest of the game, 35-3 or 35? No, that one 35-10 or whatever the score was. Yep. So Georgia figured something out and they got it to work, but Georgia, Bama, I would take Bama.
Damn, I'm taking Georgia. I think that Kirby Smart would have that team ready to murder somebody.
But Kalen DeBoer Kalen DeBoer has won a national championship at Sioux Falls, got to a national championship with Washington. Now he's at Bama.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But I think how that game finished, and you look at how well Georgia played. Like, Carson Beck was terrible in the first half. That led to some turnovers. That led to some quick scores for Alabama. You look at who won that game coming out of it from a mental perspective. I would say Georgia walked out of that game winning it mentally.
Can I put so? I don't think you're wrong in saying that. Here's what I would say, though. One of the big reasons, because Georgia has not been an amazing team this year, but we know what they have. We know the pedigree and we know the coaching, right? Like, that's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest reasons we think so highly of them. And one of the reasons you probably have them winning the national championship is Kirby Smart. You can't tell me Kirby and the company did not prepare for that Bama game. If I'm not mistaken, Georgia might have had a bye week going into that game. I could be wrong, but
they both did.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So they had plenty of time to prepare for that game. The best coach in the country, a lot of people would say, and the Alabama coaching staff completely won the game plan. So, like, that, the biggest thing that I leave saying from that, honestly, and I agree, Georgia won the second half and they figured something out. The biggest thought I left with that game was, wow, Kalen DeBoer just dominated Kirby Smart in the tactical battle.
He did, but it was just Jalen Milroe making plays early. Like the second half totally changed. I equate it to Georgia just not getting off the bus. Like that game's in Alabama. It's in Tuscaloosa. It's a hard environment. Things start going wrong. I give more credit to Georgia fighting their way back into that football game than I do Alabama coming out hot. Alabama should come out hot at home, and they took advantage of Georgia's turnovers. But Georgia's the ability to come out and keep playing football and eventually take a lead in that game, that's a win for me.
You know where the national championship game is being played?
The Peach Bowl, Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta.
Yeah. So, I mean, but again, if the game's in Atlanta, it's going to be 50-50. It doesn't really matter.
It will, but it's not 50-50 is better than at Bama, kind of to your point.
Yeah, definitely. So I take Georgia over Ohio State. I would take Georgia over Alabama. If Ohio State played Georgia, who would you take, Grant?
I really want to say Ohio State because I think they are kind of clearly a much better team overall, but I just don't. This is, you know how we were talking about we're going to find something out about Indiana here? We're going to find out something about Ryan Day over these next couple of months.
He can't
well, he couldn't win against Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh. I can't really fault him for that. Like he's dominated everybody else, but if we get to this playoff and they lose a game they shouldn't, or they get to another big spot and they're let down, now I'm going to look at Ryan Day as a James Franklin type of coach.
I trust Carson Beck more than I trust Will Howard. I trust Kirby Smart.
Howard's been great this year.
I know the stats look great. The stats look great.
He was the best player in the Oregon game.
Grant, he was trash down the stretch in that Oregon game.
On the final drive, he messed it up.
That's when I need you to be great. Will Howard, I don't trust Will Howard with the ball. Will Howard is beat up on bad teams this year. We'll see what he does against good defenses.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing with the same thing that Curtis Rourke for Indiana is. Like, this is a guy that was a 4-year MAC player. Now he's undefeated going on the road to face, number 2 Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, all these quarterbacks at these top tier programs kind of have the same stats. They've thrown 20 something touchdowns. They've thrown 4 or 5 interceptions. They all look about the same on paper.
Yeah, I like your Jackson Dart shout though. Shedeur is my number 1 quarterback in the country. Jackson Dart is right up there. I think Cam Ward's probably number 2, but Jackson Dart might be my number 3.
Oh yeah. I mean, Jackson Dart, but look, Jackson Dart, 22 touchdowns, 4 picks. Will Howard, I think, is 25-4, 25-5. Shedeur, what's Shedeur? Shedeur is clearly the best. I mean, he's taken the team with nothing and made them into something. If you put Shedeur on any of these teams, they're like by far national champions. Shedeur is 27-7. They're all about that same range.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Shedeur's got Travis Hunter and some very good weapons over there, but I agree. Like if Shedeur had Georgia's defense, we're talking about one of the best college teams, of the last however many years.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Grant, take us out of here.
Guys, that was a longer but very fun episode of Ride the Line. Taryn and I appreciate you all tuning in. If you have not up to this point, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss out when we post. Also, hit that like button as well. It helps us out a lot. And check out WSN.com if you plan on betting anything in the sports world this weekend. We will catch you all on the next episode of Ride the Line.